Good morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien, N Baba, here on the morning of Monday, June 22nd, 2020. And I wanted to do an editorial today on the misconception of the Civil War by both whites and blacks. For you whites, the Civil War was thought over ideology, and when it ended, there was no such thing as preservation of the Union. The Union was dead. The Union that you see today is a disaster. It wasn't the Union that President Lincoln tried to preserve. For you African Americans, your definition of slavery doesn't apply because of the way the Civil War ended and what happened after effects of it. That you should have sat down with your white people, and you still do must sit down and look at it, along with other factions and other pigmentations. But will you do that? Hell no. But here's the problem. The misconception of the war was slavery. Slavery was not the war. Slavery was a business that the South used. It was their economic engine. Okay? The North had started industrializing. They didn't rely on slavery, but they needed workers. And as would come to pass half a century later, the workers migrated north, which was the African Americans that the North wanted. It cost them big time issues, too. They didn't count on it. The South wanted their version of the Union with states' rights, and they controlling the Continental Railroad through the South. That was one of the issues of the war. The North wanted it through where it went through in 1869. Okay? And the abolitionists were actually a pain in the neck in the North. They weren't, the North wasn't exactly, oh yeah, we're going to end slavery. Are you kidding? It's like telling people from the North, we want the he, she's, and the what's up here in the North. Yeah? Other than San Francisco, I don't know where the he, she's, and the she, he's are going to be more acceptable. There are states in the North that don't like them. Just like there are states in the South that don't like Yankees, and states in the North that don't like blacks. So you see what I mean? You still got that issue. Second, when the war ended in 1865, the radical Republicans after and the worst thing that could happen was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. You had a Democratic president who didn't understand what was going on, Andrew Johnson, uh, and a radical Republicans which were hell-bent on punishing the South. That's why they created all these amendments to give the African Americans power. But how do you integrate a bipigment society? There's no biracial society here. It was a bipigment society. How do you do that? Really? And you don't do it by all those amendments. You could pass probably the 13th, which was, the right to vote. But most of the South, African Americans, needed help. They were illiterate. They didn't know how the system worked. And nobody was there to teach them. You just wanted to say, hey, you're going to stay in the South, so let's the South deal with you. We'll just give you all these things, and you guys deal with them. And that's not the way to bring a society up. You should have waited a couple decades before you implemented the 14th and the 15th. But do something for the Southern African Americans. You're going to need them in the North eventually, so bring them in at, and this is what I'm saying, guarantees instead of equal rights. Because nobody's equal. But you should be guaranteed to be in the society at the same guarantees as the other pigmentations and factions. You didn't do that. Therefore, when the South got you back in the derriere in 1876, Republicans, and say, okay, you want the presidency, we'll give it to you, but you get the hell out of the South, and we run it the way we want it. And by the time the 20th century came along, 25 years later, the South was sufficiently entitled in the Jim Crow laws, and they had sufficient uh, force to create havoc in the Supreme Court because you had Grover Cleveland, twice president there, and he appointed people to the Supreme Court in both his terms. This caused the watering down of the 14th Amendment, which caused the Jim Crow laws to get from the South to the North. They call them segregation. Do you understand this, African Americans and whites? Really? This is the misnomer. And you black Americans, you are out there, oh, we got to destroy these monuments. You should leave them where they are and tell your children they were built in the early 20th century and why. Teach them so they understand how bigotry can get really bad. If you destroy them, you're not teaching your next generations nothing. But you don't get that. You got watermelons for brains, same as the whites do. Anyway, this is your favorite alien named Bubba. Do you guys understand? No. Good day.